Sushila Shukla. I welcome you all students to Saket online classes. Today I shall start a poem on John Keats' poem Ode to the Nightingale. But before starting the poem, I would like to request you to like, share and subscribe our channel if you like it. Please don't forget to subscribe it. Now I shall start the poem. The poem is Ode to the Nightingale, written by John Keats. John Keats is the poet. First I shall describe about the life and work of John Keats. John Keats was the youngest and the most short-lived of the English Romantic poet. This poet, John Keats, was born in the year 1795 at Moorfield in London. His father was a stable keeper who died in 1804, leaving this child as an orphan at the age of 19. At the age of 19, John Keats' father had died, he had become orphan, and due to the death of his father, this factor compelled him to leave his studies. He was compelled to leave his studies at the age of 15 without completing his education. He first sought the apprenticeship to be a pharmacist and later to a surgeon. But the traits of a poet were dominating enough to abandon the medical profession. Even after his mother's death, perhaps his cup of woes was still empty. His mother died, but the cup of his woes was still empty, that his brother Tom, whom he loved extremely, he who was his last rose of summer, fell into a victim of tuberculosis. His brother also, after his mother had died, his brother Tom, whom he loved so much, he considered him to be the last rose of his summer. He also became the victim of tuberculosis and died in 1810. In his poem Ode to the Nightingale, he refers to the death of his brother. The poem Ode to the Nightingale, which I am going to explain to you all. In this poem, he refers the death of his brother. The line is, where youth grows pale and spectra thin and dies. Where youth grows pale and spectra thin and dies. These lines he expressed in the poem Ode to the Nightingale at the time of the death of his brother. In the year 1816, Keats met Fanny Robin. He met Fanny Robin and fell in love with her. Fanny Robin, she became her lover. He loved her very much. It was a period of Keats' life when his worries were at a climax, which made his life miserable. He was dejected by her lover. Fanny Robin, she dejected him, and he then wrote the poem Lovely Dame Sends Mercy, is written after he was dejected by Fanny Robin. After he was dejected by Fanny Robin, his lover, he had written the poem A Lovely Dame Sends Mercy. He addressed his beloved, Fanny Robin, the lady without mercy. After that, he addressed Fanny Robin, the lady without mercy. His works, in the year 1818, he published Endymion. Keats' versatiles are The Eve of St. Agnes, The Eve of St. Mark, Isabella, and some other poems like Lovely Dame Sends Mercy. Lines on the Mermaid, In a Benighted December, Ode to the Nightingale, On a Grecian Urn, To Autumn, represented his finest work. These were his finest work, Ode to the Nightingale, On a Grecian Urn, To Autumn. These are his finest work of poetry. Keats lived very short period of his life. That is merely 25 years. Only he had lived for 25 years. Yet his entire poetic work was contained in 4 years, that is from 1815 to 1820. He had a very short life, that was only 25 years, but his complete poetic work was completed in 4 years, that is from 1815 to 1820. Now about the poem, Ode to the Nightingale is one of his finest ode of Keats. It was published in 1820. This poem he had published in 1820. The poet was inspired to write this poem by a real nightingale that had built a nest in his garden. A nightingale who had built a nest in his garden, he heard the sweet song of the nightingale. This inspired him to write this poem, Ode to the Nightingale. He felt a continuous joy in hearing the song of the nightingale. One morning, he took his chair from the breakfast table. He was taking his breakfast when suddenly the nightingale began to sing in the garden. He took his chair and went and sat under the plum tree, sat there for 2-3 hours, and there he wrote this poem, Ode to the Nightingale. Now I shall read the first stanza of the poem and explain to you all. The first stanza of the poem is, My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my senses as though of hemlock I had drunk or emptied some dull plate to the drains. 1 minute passed and late words had sunk. 1 minute passed, the late words had sunk. Now the explanation. The poet says that when he hears the beautiful song of the nightingale, a painful sensation is felt in his heart. There is a painful sensation in his heart, he feels. Even the limbs, it appears to get numb, that is, getting loose and relaxed, and they are losing the power of sensation. Even the limbs, they become numb, they lose the power of sensation after hearing the beautiful song of the nightingale. The poet expresses this feeling of numbness of his limb with the help of a simile. He says, just like when we drink a hemlock wine, a cup of wine is being drunk, person feels he is losing his consciousness and he feels that there is numb in his parts of the body. In the same way, when he hears the beautiful song of the nightingale, he feels that there is a pain in his heart and numbness in his limbs and bodies. Now, the second stanza is, it's not through envy of the happy lot. It is not through envy of the happy lot, but being too happy in the happiness, that thou, light-winged dread of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Now the second stanza explanation is, the poet says that the painful sensation in the heart and in his lip is not caused by jealousy. He does not have any hatred feeling towards the bird. That is why he feels numbness or has a pain in his heart. But it is due to the happiness of the bird. He feels very happy to see the bird being very happy. In the company of the bird, the poet also feels happy. And in the feeling of happy, there is a pain created in the heart of the poet. He said the pain is caused rather by the extreme happiness that he feels in the happiness of the bird nightingale. He feels this happiness, extreme happiness in the company of the happiness of the bird nightingale. The poet says that the bird is not an ordinary bird. He says that this bird is not an ordinary bird. She is a dryad. Dryad means a fairy which lives on the branches of on the tree, jumping and singing from one branch to another. She is singing a melodious song from some orchard of the beech tree. And the song of the nightingale is so beautiful, and it is charming in the moonlight in the orchard forest. In this happy surrounding, the nightingale is singing of the beauty and warmth of the summer. The bird is singing of the beauty and the warmth of the summer. The song is coming from her heart. The song, it appears from the deepest part of her heart. Her spontaneous, full throat music fills the poet's heart with excess of happiness. This beautiful song of the nightingale, which she sings in her full-throated music, fills the heart of the poet with excess of gladness. Now the third stanza is, "O far for a drought of vantage that hath been, cooled a long age in the deep, deep earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance a provincial song, and so's burnt myth." Now the explanation of the third stanza is, the poet is overpowered by the song and the beautiful music of the nightingale. He is overpowered by the melodious song of the bird nightingale, and conscious of the sorrows of his own life. Then he thinks of the sorrows of his own life. He wishes to leave this sorrowful world. He thinks he would leave this sorrowful world and join the happiness of the world of the nightingale. He says the nightingale, her world is very filled with happiness, so he would soon leave his own sorrowful world and go to the world of the nightingale. He knows wine is a reliever of misery of human mind. So the poet, he says that he would take a wine. With the help of the wine, he will be able to leave this world and go to the world of the nightingale. He tells that the wine should be extremely rich, old wine, which will be kept under the underground for long ages. It will serve instead as a cooling agent to the suffering mind of man. He would take a wine which has been put underground for ages, which would be cooled, and it will cool the suffering mind of the man. He says this wine would represent in taste of all the flowers with various colors and smell the freshness of the green countryside. He would also borrow elements of human joys as the spirit of dance and the sweetest song sung in the middle age of the singers. This he would do because he feels that the world of the nightingale is full of happiness. That is why the nightingale, it is very happy and sings a beautiful song of joy the whole day and night. So the poet, he decides to go in the world of the nightingale, leaving his world of sadness. Now the fourth stanza of the poem is, "Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what those among the leaves had never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret. Here where men sit and hear each other's groan." The poet is saying, fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what these among the leaves had never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret. Here where men sit and hear each other's groan. In this stanza, the poet, he tells that he wants to disappear far away in the dim forest inhabited by the nightingale. He wants to disappear from this world in the world of the nightingale. He wants to completely forget the sorrows and sufferings of the world. He is compelled to Go to the world of the nightingale and forget all the sorrows and sufferings of the world. The nightingale is blissfully ignorant of the sorrows and miseries of the world. He says, the nightingale, she does not know how people suffer this and their life is full of miseries. The people of this world are always fighting and struggling for life, is completely devoid of the happiness. We only see it. He says the bird, the nightingale, she is completely devoid of the happiness. She is completely in happiness and she does not know how the world is suffering with struggle and pain. So the poet, he again says that we only sit and groan with one another. Whenever people sit, they only fight and groan with one another. There is nothing left to communicate with each other. This suffering world is such that there is no happiness in this world. Only people sit and groan with each other, they shout at each other, they fight with each other, and there is no communication among the people at the present time. So the poet, he decides to go away in the world of the nightingale, where the nightingale is very happy and sings a beautiful song the whole day and night. Now the fifth stanza of the poem is, where Plassy shakes a few and last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectra thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and leaden eyes despair, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine of them beyond tomorrow. Now, in this, the poet says that the world in which we are born, is a strange place. It is a strange place full of sufferings and sorrows. It is a strange place full of sufferings and sorrows. No stage of human life is secure from pain and suffering. There is no such stage in human life that is without pain and suffering. Neither old age nor youth is spared. And the young people also, they also suffer in a very young age. They get different types of diseases and they suffer terribly from terrible diseases that he looks his own ghost. And then after a few days he becomes so thin, he appears like a ghost after the suffering for a long time. The moment we begin to think, our mind is filled with despair. Whenever we think of the sufferings of this world, our mind is full of despair, which makes us downcast. Our eyelids drop with despair, and even the beauty is unable to keep its luster in her eyes for more than a few days. Even the beauty, it is unable to keep the luster of brightness. It keeps only for a few days. As a result, the newborn cannot look at their bright eyes with any craving and singing for more than a few days. A newborn love also, it does not last for a long time. Only after a few days, this love also fades. So, this is the explanation of the poem Ode to the Nightingale, which John Keats, he had described the poem in a very beautiful way. How the bird, small bird, it is so happy, singing whole day and night, and seeing and hearing the song of the nightingale. The poet, he also feels happiness, and he feels that he would leave this world of suffering and pain and go in the company of the nightingale and live there happily. So, now I am stopping it here. I once again request you all to share, like and subscribe our channel if you like it. Thank you students.
इस वीडियो को अपने दोस्तों के साथ ज़रूर शेयर कीजिए। अगर इस टॉपिक पर आपके कोई भी क्वेश्चन हैं तो नीचे कमेंट करके पूछिए, हम उत्तर देने का प्रयास करेंगे। और अगर आपने अभी तक हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है तो तुरंत सब्सक्राइब करिए, साथ ही बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें ताकि आगे आने वाले सभी वीडियो आप तक पहुंचते रहें और आप हमसे यूं ही जुड़े रहें।